It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is CEO Steve Cunningham. Steve's father demonstrated successful entrepreneurship, instilled in him a lifelong passion for learning, and helped Steve learn to not mistake activity for productivity. He graduated from Western University with a law degree, and after a single week as a lawyer, he knew it wasn't his passion. Steve moved on to the family signage business, and understanding one role wouldn't be enough to satisfy his goals, he started a marketing agency. Read It For Me, where he's now CEO, creates 12-minute videos detailing the best business and personal development books in the world. Steve Cunningham, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Wonderful to have you here, Steve. We always kind of get started to talk a little bit about the early years. And I know with hockey and your background and the Canadian connection that we talked about a little bit before the podcast, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, what your early family life was like.
Yeah, I grew up in a town called Hamilton, Ontario, just about 45 minutes outside of Toronto.
Know it well. Beautiful area.
Had a fantastic upbringing, loving mother and father. I've got a younger sister. And, kind of going back into my early years, one of my favorite memories from childhood was in the basement of our house. I would listen to Tony Robbins tapes with my father, which is where I got what I think is the best gift I've ever received, which is the gift of a desire for lifelong learning. And I can still remember the sound those tapes would make. So tapes back in the day, we didn't have podcasts back then.
Right.
The smell of the cassette player, and it just really those early mornings with my father is where I got that love and passion for learning that I still have today.
Tell us about your parents. Professionals? Were they working class? What was their background?
My father was an entrepreneur. I had multiple businesses, and he started his career in sales. Shortly thereafter, figured that he wasn't very good working for other people, so he started his own business. And he's been an entrepreneur his entire life for as long as I can remember. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she did a wonderful job of being a stay-at-home mom. And just great memories of my childhood.
Other than the Tony Robbins basement sessions, which I'm sure were as much for him as they were for you, what other kind of influences did your parents have on you growing up?
One story comes to mind immediately was I was playing hockey growing up, and there's in Canada, and I don't know how they do different sports here in the States, but there's a thing called AAA hockey in Canada, which is the top players from a city for the age categories. And I got cut. Actually, I made the team, and then shortly into the season, I was demoted to the AA team, which was an odd scenario. The coach called me up. I was 10 years old, and didn't talk to my parents. Just told me I was demoted. So that was a weird experience. I was 10. I was devastated. I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to play. I didn't want to go play for the AA team. And my father, in a kind and gentle way, convinced me that I should just give it a shot. Just go and try it for a few weeks, and if you still don't want to play, that's fine. And I learned the lesson of perseverance, and that things are not always as bad as they seem. And if you don't give it a shot, you're not going to know, what you're made out of.
So true.
And so for me, that was, I was never the most talented player. I was never the most talented student. And whatever success I've had in life was because I tried hard. And so
got back on the horse as well.
Yeah. So that was a great lesson that I learned from my childhood. So I would say that was a huge influence on me, that and, that love of learning, both of which I think have served me well as an entrepreneur and a CEO.
Are there any early influencers, any coaches or teachers that you remember, things that have stuck with you through the years?
That's a good question. I remember some of my teachers fondly, some of them not so fondly. I think in terms of influences, the biggest influence I think were definitely my parents, my father in particular, when it comes to sports and learning and personal development.
Were you a good student?
I was a fairly good student. I think an A student in grade school, a decent student in high school. So I wasn't a Rhodes Scholar by any means, but
class,
I would say I was a good student.
Obviously, you played hockey. Any other sports or music, theater, things that interested you growing up?
Yeah, I played classical piano for a while. I started when I think I was 4 years old, playing piano. I played some baseball growing up, lacrosse, which is is a version of lacrosse played inside a hockey rink when the hockey rink melts for the summer.
On ice?
On the floor, so they keep the boards up for the arena, but you play it on the
indoor.
So indoors. Yeah, and I was definitely a sports junkie growing up.
You did some, in your longer biography, we talked about some of your entrepreneurial things. I think at the age of 4 or 6, you were trading baseball cards. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was a big hockey card and baseball card collector, and we would go to this older guy's house. So he ran a little business outside of his house. And
How old was he? When you say older guy?
Yeah, well, he was probably No, he was a man. So I think he must have been in his his 30s or 40s, but he seemed old to me. And I've always had an entrepreneurial bent, so I figured out where he was getting his cards from, and I started my own little business on the side. And I think it lasted about a month because I had told that guy who
supplier.
was now my competitor that I was now getting supplied by this other guy, and he got upset, and so I got cut off from this main supplier. So I got started a business and got pushed out of the market.
You learned a little bit about competition, right?
I
Who to
sure
share
did.
information with.
Yeah,
that's a good lesson to learn early on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a short-lived experiment, but I didn't lose any passion for it, for sure.
What were some of the other entrepreneurial things that you did early on?
I learned a really good marketing lesson when I think I was even younger than that, and I wanted to hold my own garage sale. And I took all of my toys out and I put them on the front lawn. And what I didn't do was that I didn't tell anybody I was having a garage sale. I was just a weird kid sitting on the lawn with all of his toys, and nobody stopped to buy anything. So I learned the importance of marketing and letting people know that you've got some things that they might like to buy.
What about jobs? I know you've been pretty much an entrepreneur your whole career. Did you hold any jobs going through high school or college?
In high school, I typically, during the summers, would work with and for my dad, doing odd jobs. I had a job one year pruning Christmas trees, which was probably the worst job I've ever had. In the blazing sun, clipping pine trees by hand, with swarms of bees and pine getting all over you, and it was a tough job. In university, I drove a potato chip truck, so I would drive around to all the convenience stores and deliver their chips to them, stocking up the chips. And during law school, I had a job working for a law firm. So aside from those were my jobs while I was in school, and then since then I've been an entrepreneur.
I remember reading in your deeper background that you tried being a lawyer for about a week and then you knew that wasn't for you. So let's talk a little bit about what led you on your college journey. Did Dad have his degree and Mom?
No, I was the first one in my family to get a college degree.
So it wasn't really a foregone conclusion. Was it something that you were encouraged to do by Dad or others, or something you put your heart against?
In terms of college, or
Yeah, exactly. In terms of going to college at all, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was never a question for me whether I was going to go to college. My parents, like I said, raised me to place a high importance on learning. I think it was something that he wanted for me, and because I was playing hockey, it was a logical thing for me to do. And it was never a question of whether or not I would go to college. But so I think it was instilled in me very young that that's what I would be doing.
How did you pick a major and decided you want to go into law initially?
The major, I honestly don't remember how I chose it. I've always been good at math, so my major was math and economics, and a minor in business administration. So I think I just gravitated towards the things that I was naturally good at in school, and really enjoyed that. How I chose law school, I graduated in 2001, and around that time, I had considered going into investment banking. And the school that I went to had a lot of alumni on Wall Street, and some of my friends actually went into investment banking. And of course, September of that year was 9/11. So I'm not sure how I decided not to do it, but I decided I didn't want to go into investment banking. And I was taking a law class at the time, and my father had always wanted me to become a professional. That was his hope for me. So, doctor, lawyer, accountant, and so on. So I decided that much like I think a lot of people do, I'm not sure what I want to do for a living. So I'll get some more education, was really the long and the short of it. So I took the LSAT, passed. I applied to some law schools and I got in, and that was how I decided. So it was never a career that I had grown up wanting to get into, but I enjoyed the learning around it. I enjoyed the intellectual rigor of how lawyers think, and which is what I got out of my class while I was in college. So I figured that would be a good proxy for what I would learn in law school, and that's how I landed in law school.
It sounds like you went straight to law school too. There was no working time in between once you graduated from undergrad.
That's right.
So what was that first job out of law school? Tell us about that law firm and that famous week.
Well, it was between my second and third year in law school that I got a job at a law firm, and I essentially got to carry the bag for the senior partner at the firm for the entire summer. And I say that in all seriousness. I carried bags, I drove them around to things, got to do a little bit of work on my own. But what struck me during that summer was that most of the people that I met in the law firm and the other people in the law hated their lives. And I tell the story of when I was driving the potato chip truck and I was getting my training from one of the guys who was doing that full time. And he made an offhand comment to me that he lived for the weekend. And I thought, that's that really stuck with me. And that's not something that I wanted for myself in a career. And very surprising to me that when I went into the law firm, and I don't know if every law firm does this, but on Friday afternoons, sometimes lawyers take long lunches that include alcoholic beverages, and they loosen up a little bit. And the vast majority of them basically admitted that this was a job for them. They didn't consider it a calling. They weren't passionate about the work that they did, and it was a way to make a paycheck.
Wasted lives.
Yeah. So, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not how I wanted to live my life, and so I decided then and there that if I was going to put in long hours and be miserable, I might as well do it about something I'm passionate about. So,
absolutely.
I went to my father and I said, I know you really want me to go to law school or be a lawyer, but I don't think my heart's in it. And what I want to do, what I really think would fulfill me is to join you in the family business. And at the time, it was a small sign company. And, my dad didn't have visions of me coming back to work in his sign business. He had visions of me being a professional. And so for him, it was a difficult thing to hear. So he made a deal with me, much like the deal he made with me when I got cut from the hockey team. And he said that, if you finish up law school and you get called to the bar and you still want to come join me in the family business, then we can talk. So I finished up law school, and in Canada, they have an apprenticeship year, which is called articling. And so I finished up my articling, got called to the bar, and the law firm, which had offered me a job full-time, but I turned down. And I said, well, if you're not going to work for us full-time, can you at least stick around for a week and finish up this file you're working on? Because we don't have anybody else to do it. So I figured, this would be a good story to tell for the rest of my life, that I was a lawyer for exactly 1 week. And here I am. I think I still hold the world record on shortest tenure. Or I've yet to meet someone who has done it for 4 days instead of 5.
A shorter time, right? So did you go to work for Dad right away then, or what happened afterwards?
I did. I joined the family business. He quickly made me the president of the company. And as I like to joke, if law school does a bad job of preparing you to be a lawyer, it does an even worse job of preparing you to run a business. So, and what they do in law school, people ask me, what's law school like? Well, they assign you hundreds of pages of reading every single day, and you have to come back the next day being ready to summarize basically what you had learned in front of the entire class, and then the professor essentially asks you a bunch of tough questions and embarrasses you. That's law school times 3 years. So you do that for 3 years, and but what you get really good at is consuming a lot of information very quickly, and then making really good notes on it so that when it's your turn to stand up in front of the class, you don't embarrass yourself. So I did the only thing when I joined the family business that I knew how to do, which is I went out and I bought as many books as I possibly could on leadership and sales and marketing. And I read them, and I just was in the habit of making really good notes and essentially creating summaries of those books. And this was around the time when social media was starting to become a thing for business, but there were no real case studies around it. So just to kind of tee those two things up for context. And I decided when I joined the family business that I didn't want to run a sign company for the rest of my life. As I was reading these business books, it seemed to me like the people who had this joy and passion for life were the people that I was introduced to through the stories of entrepreneurship, and in particular, people who were in marketing. People in marketing were super fascinating to me. They seemed to be big, huge characters, and just loved what they did. And that's what I wanted for myself. So I decided, incorrectly, by the way, that the best way to do that is to create a marketing agency. But that's what I did. And I started to get a bunch of meetings with CEOs and executives. And I think we were speaking quickly before we joined the call that I was doing a lot of speaking on the topic around the time. So I got a lot of meetings, and I did a bunch of what I now know as free consulting. That's a bad idea if you want to join a business or create a business. But in every one of these meetings, I would notice that the CEOs and the VPs of marketing and so on would have a stack of books on their desk or on their shelf. And so doing a little bit of sales 101, I tried to create some rapport. And so I would invariably have read some of the books that were in their office. And I would ask them, what did you think about this idea from that book and that idea from this book and so on? And most of the time, they would stare back at me blankly. And
having not read it themselves or not remembering it, right?
Right. Sheepishly admit, for the most part, that they hadn't read them.
Yeah. It got on their desk by someone giving it to them or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they bought it and they're at some conference and they bought it because the author was there. And so then I thought, well, okay, this is interesting. So I got a conundrum. I got, nobody wants to be the first person to write a check for social media marketing for their business. So what I'm going to need to do is create our own case study. So rather than explaining to them the vision of what they could use social media for their business, I would have to show them a case study. So we decided to do our own case study. So I took my notes that I was making on these books, and we created an animated video around the summary that I had created. An animated video at the time, because I was doing these myself, is vastly overselling it. It was a horribly put together keynote presentation with me voicing it over. So we sent it to 10 people. Those 10 people passed it on to 20, to 50, to 100, and 1,000, and so on. And so it did what we had hoped it would do, which is people, CEOs would pass it around. They would drive them back to our website, and it would generate business for us. So these days, that's called content marketing, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was just flying by the seat of my pants.
So did you start managing people in that job, or were you managing people back with Dad's business?
So it was mostly at the time running the marketing agency. So slowly but surely that was working. It was helping us generate clients. But then we would get some weird phone calls from people. One of them was people started calling me, telling me that they were VCs. And I was in Hamilton, Ontario, in a signage company with a marketing agency built inside of it. And I had never heard of a VC. And so I had no idea what they did for a living. But they were calling from Silicon Valley, asking me what my business model was. And now, as I like to joke, I have a lot of jokes around things that I was really stupid about in the past, including this one. If you want to get rid of those pesky VCs who are interested in investing in your business, just tell them you're building a marketing agency, and they'll leave
walk
you
away.
They'll leave you alone. So that's what we told them. Or this is social media. It's free, man. So they stopped calling, but slowly but surely, we got another set of calls from people saying, "Hey, I really love what you're doing. How can we become customers? How can I pay you?" And I would, patiently explain to them that, you don't understand. This is free. This is marketing for our business. You don't need to pay us. And then they would
got the product wrong.
Yeah, so they would patiently explain to me that no, you don't understand.
You got a viable product there.
I really like this, and I want to pay you because I want you to continue to do it. So slowly but surely, I figured it out, and we put up a PayPal paywall. Lo and behold, people started paying us. We thought, well, that's fun. That's cool. Well, maybe we can get some corporate customers. And around that time, I was reading a book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, who's the CEO of Zappos. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I just cold emailed Tony and sent him a huge long email about the ways their culture fit our culture and how our product could be great for them. And I asked him two things. One, can I interview you about your book on a podcast that I'm creating? And B, can you buy our service for your company? And this was back in the first round of social media, and when podcasts were starting to become big, like eight or 9 years ago. And he said yes to both accounts, and he became a corporate customer, or Zappos became a corporate customer. And we've just slowly but surely over the last years turned it into a full-time business. And I no longer run my marketing agency. And I'm here down in San Antonio, Texas, recording this today. So there's a bunch of stuff in between. But what happened in the meantime is, thousands of entrepreneurs and executives from around the world became customers, and here we are.
That's awesome. How would you say your leadership style has evolved over that period of time?
I literally just recorded a podcast about that specific question on the weekend, and I swear you didn't set me up for that.
I didn't.
There is one of the books that I read recently is called Radical Candor, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's radical candor is the definition is the combination of caring personally about the people you work with and challenging directly. So this kind of sweet balance of, really caring about the people that work for you, but also at the same time holding them accountable and being very straight with them about what you need from them. And so I kind of walked my podcast listeners through this idea that for the first stage of my career, I was an obnoxious jerk. And I read far too many Jack Welch books about, you got to be brutally honest with everybody at all times. And that led to many awkward conversations and generally to people not liking me as a leader. I had enough bad experiences with that I went on the flip side into what the author of Radical Candor would call ruinous empathy, which was just basically only caring about connecting with people personally. And, I would start taking people out for lunch and drinks and coffee and really getting to know them as employees. But it became very difficult for me to hold anybody accountable because I really wanted to care for them personally. And, I think I still struggle with that. But my leadership style, I think today would be to be myself, most importantly, not try to be someone I'm not, and to be as direct as I can with them while, not being that obnoxious jerk that I was in my mid to late 20s.
Well, your current company is now about 6-7 years old. Is that its current length, or has it been under different auspices during that period of time?
Yeah, it was a side gig for some time in my digital marketing agency. So we've been at Read It For Me full time for 2 years, but it's been around as a product for I think about 8 or 9.
And how many people are on your team, full-time employees and contractors?
We've got 7 employees.
So tell us a little bit about, your thoughts on building a company culture. Obviously, based on some of the learnings you had early on, you've got some thoughts about that. What does it take, and how do you go about doing it?
It's not something that we've actively spent a lot of time discussing or even consciously doing. We work. I'm down here in San Antonio, Texas. The core of my team, which we built in Canada, is up in Canada around Toronto.
Oh, they're still there. Okay.
They're still there. We've got some team members here in San Antonio. And even in Toronto, we've worked remotely. And I'm a big fan of the company Basecamp and the way that they work. And the idea is that, work gets done. The work that we do needs a lot of deep thinking time. And so we try to eliminate distractions. We don't, we're not using Slack. We're not constantly text messaging one another. We need hours at a time where we can think and do deep thinking and, deep work. So I think if I had to describe our company culture, it would be a very low key, get a lot of work done on your own. So we give a lot of autonomy to our team, and that's when we have meetings, they're purposeful, and we get actual work done in our meetings. And because we're remote, we don't spend a lot of time together. But every once in a while, we'll get together as a team, and we'll go somewhere and spend a few days as a team. So, I don't know how to describe our culture. I think that's a tough question for me because we haven't actively, directly addressed it.
Are you hiring new people? Are you building out the team, or are you pretty steady state with regards to your current business flow?
We are. It's interesting. When I first came to San Antonio, my desire and my hope was that I could just read books for a living. So I'm the one in the business who is reading and summarizing the books that we feature on Read It For Me. And the last year or so has kind of taught me that maybe that's never going to happen for me. I should probably put my big boy pants on and grow up and be a CEO. So we're actively looking for team members to run some specific programs in our company and take things off of our plate. But in general, our trajectory and how we're thinking about growing the business would involve a lot of either contractors and or partners, like independent business owners as partners. So in general, my operating principles is to keep the company as small as possible while still growing in terms of revenue and customers and so on.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in, Steve?
People who can work autonomously, people which typically means older people, but that's far too much of a broad generalization. Like people who have a track record of working autonomously, people who can think for themselves and make decisions about the work that they're doing on their own. Nice people, and we want to work with people who get along well with others. And I think basically I would look at who I was in my 20s and say, we want the opposite of that guy.
You know what you don't want, right? That's important
exactly.
Too. What brought you to San Antonio?
One of our long-term customers was a gentleman by the name of Graham Weston, who founded a company in San Antonio called Rackspace. And at one point, he needed to change his credit card information on file. So we got an email from his executive assistant saying, I need to change the credit card information you guys have. Like, how do I do that? And we got the information, and we noticed that the name on the credit card was Graham Weston. And I just the week before read a book that had featured the story of Rackspace and thus Graham in the book. So I put two and two together, and I reached out to Graham, and lo and behold, shortly after that, he got back to me. We spent some time on the phone. It turns out he's the world's only business book summary aficionado, which is it's a market of one, and he is it. And we just got to talking about business. I was lucky enough that he invited me down to San Antonio to spend some time with him in person. It's not often a self-made billionaire takes an interest in your business. So I took full advantage, and during a couple of visits down to San Antonio, I really fell in love with the tech ecosystem that they're building here in San Antonio, and really just the people here in that community. And so we had some conversations about what it would look like to bring our business down here to San Antonio, and here we are.
Yeah, awesome. We talked before the podcast about our mutual membership in C12 group. And how did you get connected with those folks? Buck Jacobs and Mike Sharrow.
So I got connected with Mike Sharrow through a friend / customer out of Dallas who I think either knows Mike personally or it was acquaintance of Mike. And he was just doing a nice favor by connecting us to somebody who might be a good potential customer. And I remember the call vividly. I was sitting at home in my basement talking to Mike and this other gentleman. And as it turns out, Mike was looking for a book summary company to augment the materials that C12 produces every month. And I explained to Mike that, I'd been a member of Vistage for many years up in Canada. And, I was looking for something that was a convergence of my business and my faith. And we kind of took the conversation from there, and fast forward to today, and I'm a C12 member here in San Antonio, and love every minute of it.
Well, Steve, you've been very generous with your time, and we're just about over 30 minutes here. So a couple of things. You'd mentioned that you had an offer for our listeners. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We've recently launched a new product line in our business. We're calling it The List. And one of the use cases of our product is for people to be able to stay on top of the latest and greatest business books, the ones that are on the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Amazon charts bestsellers lists. And if you go to our website, you'll see that for sale for $99 per year per person. But we're offering it for free to our partner network, and we love to make that offer to your audience as well. So if you go over to readitfor.me/ROI, you'll be able to sign up for a free account for The List there. And we'll look forward to having you in the Read It For Me community.
Thank you, Steve. And we'll also post that where our podcast is posted on our website as soon as that goes up when you get released. It'll be sometime around Christmas time. So a nice Christmas gift for all our audience. Last question for you, Steve. As we talked about before, many of our listeners are, mid-career folks that maybe are in the C-suite, have their eye on the corner office, or maybe thinking about something, entrepreneurial on their own. But what career and life advice would you give to those folks who really have their eyes either on, creating a business themselves or make it into the CEO slot?
Well, I can't comment directly on what it takes to get into the CEO chair from inside a company. But I can comment on how to become the CEO of your own company. And I was just having a chat with a gentleman today who was contemplating doing just that. And the advice that I gave him was, and this is going to sound very simplistic, but I think it's the best advice I can give, which is try a lot of things and keep what works and stop doing what doesn't. And I think the principle behind this is the only way you're actually going to learn what works and what doesn't work is to do it. And far too often, I think people get caught up in overanalyzing things and overworking things in their mind and trying to get things perfect. And what I've learned as an entrepreneur is that no matter how much thinking you do about an idea or a product or anything that you're going to do in life, what it looks like in reality is going to be much different than what you think it is. And the way to get to where you need to go is to continue to do things and to iterate your way to success. And I think any successful CEO and entrepreneur would tell you that.
No, that's very helpful. And, I think you said it, if not, you certainly implied it. Find something you love to do. That's come through so often. You talked about the lawyers and, the potato chip guy who lived for the weekends. If you're not enjoying your work, we spend most of our time doing it. Find something else. There's a lot of things to do out there, and you should have a passion and enjoy what you do every day.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, and I've heard both sides of that equation, which is you should find something you love and do that. But the flip side is to do the things that you're very good at, and that eventually you'll learn to love it. And I think there's value in both of those approaches, but certainly don't do something that you absolutely hate or can't see yourself doing for the rest of your life, because it's going to be a long haul.
Steve Cunningham, thank you once again for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Handley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.